Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. As my 6th year in the Marine Corps was drawing to a close, I faced an important decision. My name is Captain David Hill. I'm 35, a Marine, and recently married to Madison, a vibrant 30-year-old woman with striking light red hair. We met 2 years ago while I was on leave in my hometown, and from the beginning, it felt like something extraordinary. We both sensed it but only decided to marry 6 months ago. Originally, I planned to leave the Marine Corps first, but Madison's gentle persuasion led us to marry with 6 months left in my service. Leaving behind the stability of the Marine Corps was a decisive step, but I took it for our future. Looking back, I might have made a different choice. Initially, everything went smoothly. My service term was ending, we were planning our life together, when suddenly an unexpected deployment came up. I was sent on a 4-month assignment to train foreign troops, a mission that took an ironic turn when those very forces later clashed with American soldiers. Political maneuvers complicated the situation. Before leaving, I promised Madison I'd be back for Christmas. I left, kept my word, and returned home in early December. We celebrated Christmas and New Year together. We settled into a condo near my new workplace, a job closely related to my field of study. It seemed like life was finally falling into place, a stable career, a wonderful wife, and a promising future. But then, as soon as I officially left the Marines, we were hit with an unexpected blow. The day after my discharge, I was at our rented house, watching movers pack up our belongings for the upcoming move. I stood in the bedroom, watching as they dismantled the bed, while Madison supervised the kitchen. When the bed was removed, they returned for the nightstands. One of the movers gave me a strange look, smirked, and shook his head. Following his gaze, I saw something that took me aback. A pile of used, dried condoms on the floor. I froze. Madison and I didn't use them. She was on birth control. I shut the bedroom door and waited in silence until the movers finished their work. After they left, I called Madison into the room, opened the door, and said, "I'm not cleaning this up." I watched her face change, horror dawning on her as she clasped her hand over her mouth and sank to the floor, sobbing. "No, oh God, no." She collapsed to the floor, pale. "It was only once," she said through her tears. "I was lonely and it just happened. It didn't mean anything. I love you." I wanted to believe her, but what I saw made it difficult. Pointing to the condoms, I replied, "This doesn't look like once. I see about 10. Her sobs grew louder as the weight of everything hit her. As she cried, I left her and went to vacuum in another room. Eventually, she gathered herself, carefully put the condoms in a plastic bag, and threw them in the trash. She finished cleaning the bedroom in silence, and I told her I'd stay at a hotel, asking her to bring dinner. Perhaps it was a sign I wasn't ready to let everything go. A shared meal felt like a small thread still connecting us. After she locked up the house, she brought some food, cheeseburgers, fries, and milkshakes. She texted me when she arrived, and I gave her the room number. I left the door open. First floor, room 157. Inside was one double bed, a faint glimmer that there was still something between us. She quietly laid out the food, trying to find a way to bridge the gap between us, hoping maybe this was something we could survive. We ate almost in complete silence, and the quiet between us said more than words ever could. When we sat down for dinner, he looked at me without a single warm word, without a kiss. Instead, he asked, "Don't you want to explain yourself?" I had no choice but to admit what had happened. When he left on his business trip, I was left in utter despair, an emptiness inside that gnawed at me every day. For the first 2 days, I couldn't stop crying, consumed by the loneliness that his departure left behind. But eventually, I told myself I'd manage. After all, he'd be back soon enough. After all, he was just teaching there. It wasn't a war zone, just his beloved job. I pulled myself together and focused on the future. One Friday morning, I went to get groceries, but on the way, I noticed the fuel gauge was almost empty. I decided I'd make it to the store first before filling up, and then the car started sputtering and finally stalled. I was out of gas, stranded on an empty road. I opened the hood, hoping someone would pass by, and felt relieved when a man on a motorcycle stopped. When I explained I was out of gas, he offered to give me a ride to the nearest station. I'd never ridden a motorcycle before, so the trip was thrilling, like a breath of fresh air amid the disappointments of that day. At the gas station, we grabbed a can of gas and he took me back to my car. I tried to pay him as a thank you, but he refused. So I offered him lunch and he agreed. We ended up in a cafe, unexpectedly spending the entire meal together. He wasn't from around here. He'd taken a break from college to explore the country on his bike. Handsome, with long black hair and a striking appearance, he was witty, intelligent, and easy to talk to. Looking back, I realize I crossed a line when I invited him over. The loneliness I felt pushed me to take that step, which I considered insignificant, a secret he'd never find out. That weekend, we ended up in bed together. Although I was on birth control, I insisted on additional protection each time. I couldn't allow for other consequences. On Monday morning, he packed up, got on his motorcycle, and left without a word. That was the last I saw of him, I swear. As for the contraceptives, he always went to the bathroom afterward, and I thought he threw them away there. I have no idea why he hid them behind the nightstand. The table was pressed tightly against the wall by the bed, so I never moved it while cleaning. Please don't let this tear us apart. I was so lonely and I missed you so much. Tears blurred my vision as I confessed everything to him, and finally I saw his face soften. He embraced me and we ended up in the shower, holding each other, surrendering to love again that night, and once more in the morning before setting off on our 12-hour journey to start a new chapter in our lives. Somehow, he still loved me. But from David's perspective, it was different. Yes, I still loved her, but trust, that's something else entirely. She managed to hide it from me for 4 months, and I couldn't help but wonder, what if there was something else she was hiding? Deep down, I understood that my own decisions had played a role too. I postponed the wedding until I finished my service, knowing that constant trips and long separations could be a heavy burden for anyone. Life as a Marine's wife isn't easy. Long waits, months of solitude while we're deployed in distant places with the 3rd Marine Division. Was my 4-month absence the final straw? Perhaps. I could admit that. So I decided to leave it behind. This time. But from now on, I'd be watching her every step. 5 years later, life couldn't be better. My investments in the commodity market have paid off handsomely, building a solid financial foundation. With this success, Madison and I are eagerly searching for a house outside the city, a quiet spot with ample land where we can start a family. Our relationship is stronger than ever. Any past issues are long behind us. We're nearly inseparable, and Madison seems genuinely happy. Each time I have to travel for business, she's right by my side. Yet something inside keeps me from letting go of the past, and trust hasn't fully returned. The saying, "Fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me," lingers in my mind, along with another. Once a cheater, always a cheater. These thoughts are reminders, keeping my guard up. One day, Madison calls, excited to tell me she's found the perfect property. It's a huge estate, a mansion with 6 bedrooms on a vast plot of land. Although the house has seen better days, its elegance and old-world charm instantly captivate me. It feels like a slice of history, straight out of Gone with the Wind. Restoring the mansion will cost around $500,000, but we decide to take the risk. We buy the property and start searching for a contractor specializing in historic renovations. After reviewing positive recommendations, we hire someone who relocates to an apartment about a half-hour away, ready to begin the restoration. Madison takes an active role, insisting on having an office on site to oversee the restoration and manage subcontractors. She decides to control the finances herself to avoid any issues. She arranges for a small trailer to be installed near the main house, complete with well water, a septic system, electricity, and a large gas tank for winter heating. In the back of my mind, I imagine that one day this trailer might serve as quarters for helpers when we move in and start our family life. But before the restoration begins, I make a small move. One day, when Madison and I go out for lunch and a movie, A technician I hired discreetly installs surveillance cameras inside the trailer. These cameras stream video to a secure site where I can check things as needed. Though my love for her remains strong, trust is another matter. The first 3 months go by without incident. I see nothing suspicious on the screen. But one Wednesday afternoon, I log into the site and see Madison and Sam, our contractor, examining blueprints in the trailer's living room. To my horror, he places a hand on her thigh, giving it a slight squeeze. "When will you give me that sweetness again?" he asks. My stomach tightens. Again? What does he mean by again? Keeping her composure, she replies, "If you promise not to leave any marks, we can right now." She pulls him in for a kiss. They pull apart briefly, and he laughs, "I promise," before lifting her into his arms and carrying her to one of the empty bedrooms in the trailer. Suddenly, everything becomes clear. This isn't the first time. How long has this been going on? When it started no longer matters. I know what I need to do. After they're finished, I watch her carefully dispose of protection. She's learned how to cover her tracks. As they dress, Sam tells her, "Just give the signal when you're ready." Madison replies coldly, "Not until the house is done. You'll return to your home and I'll stay here, setting up our dream house. David will be robbed and killed for his watch and wallet. The memories will be too painful to stay, so I'll sell this place. With $1 million insurance payout, we'll leave far away and live the high life for a long time." He returns to the construction site after they get dressed, and she locks the trailer and leaves, likely heading home. I turn off the computer, contemplating her grand plan. She's planning to get rid of me, then run off with her lover to start a new life. Well, it certainly won't happen right before my eyes. She gets home before I do, and is already filling the bathtub. When I walk in, she greets me with a long kiss. I can only hope she brushed her teeth. Then, she heads straight to the bathroom. I settle in front of the TV to watch the evening news and wonder what she's plotting this time. After finishing her bath, she comes back to the living room, sits on the floor in front of my chair, and eagerly starts describing how the house will look when it's done and how she'll be able to stop taking birth control pills. She's already dreaming of 3 kids, picturing herself as the perfect wife and mother. Thursday comes, and I head to work while she goes to the farm. All day I kept a close watch, but nothing suspicious happened. She left around 1 in the afternoon, and Sam worked alone until nearly dusk. When I got home, she was already there. That evening, she wanted to stay close. Why not? Later, she mentioned I had been a bit rough, even leaving a couple of bruises. I quickly apologized, though I felt no guilt inside. The next morning, I bought a few things I'd need for the weekend. Saturday was a free day with no work and closed markets. Madison had an appointment for hairstyling and a manicure, which gave me some time alone. By midday, I was back at the apartment watching a game when Madison came in. She looked stunning. I suggested we go out for dinner and dancing that evening. She was thrilled, and by 7, we were dressed and headed to a restaurant. We had steaks, danced until midnight, and when we returned home, she was full of desire. We ended up in bed until morning. Sunday was a lazy day. We slept in until noon, had a late breakfast, and watched football. Her favorite team lost. Maybe that's a sign? On Monday morning, I kissed her goodbye before heading to the office. She went to the construction site, where I saw her enter the trailer, likely to review payment contracts. Around 11 a.m., she headed to the main house, and I waited for her to come out. An hour later, she returned to the trailer. She made herself a tuna sandwich and stared thoughtfully out the window at the house. What could she be plotting? By 2 o'clock, Sam showed up and immediately pulled her into an embrace. "I missed you over the weekend," he whispered. "You look amazing. I love your nails and your hair is fantastic," he said to her. "Thanks, I missed you too," she replied. "I can't wait until we're together all the time. Just a little longer now." She mentioned they needed the perfect alibi so they could work together as soon as his next project began. Sam looked thrilled. "We'll be unstoppable. You'll design, I'll build. No one will suspect anything about his accident. The guy I found is a real pro, with mafia connections. Couldn't have planned it better," I thought. She took Sam by the hand, leading him toward the bedroom, whispering, "I'm tired of pretending." So it was all a performance, just as I suspected. He lifted her up, and they headed to the bedroom. I watched, giving them a bit of time as they undressed each other. As the passion heated up, suddenly a phone rang, interrupting them. Her face turned white with worry. "Whose phone is that?" she whispered, and suddenly the cameras went out. About an hour later, I got a call. An incident had happened on site, and they asked me to come immediately. I asked if I could speak with my wife, but I was told she was unavailable. It was a harsh, unembellished truth. Half an hour later, I arrived at the scene, where the head of the volunteer fire department was waiting for me. He introduced himself and began to explain what he believed had happened. The first thing I wanted to know was where my wife was. The chief gestured for me to follow him toward the ambulance, but when we reached it, she wasn't there. One of the paramedics suggested I sit down, and at that moment I was given the news. She was dead. I tried to cry, but no tears came. Instead of grief, a drive for answers took hold of me. The fire chief, a familiar face from the local bank, shared his suspicions. They believed the culprit was a faulty gas heater. It had been cold and raining endlessly over the past few days, and they likely turned on the heater to stay warm. Somehow, a spark ignited, and the fire began. He added that he had called the county sheriff and coroner as soon as he found the bodies. Bodies? Confused, I asked. Bodies? You keep saying they. Was someone with her? The fire chief hesitated a bit, then replied, "We're confident that one of the bodies is your wife. We believe the other is Sam Anderson, the contractor." He fell silent, clearly uncomfortable. "This will be hard to hear, but you need to know, we found them together in bed, in an intimate position." He awkwardly explained that they were discovered holding each other, caught in the midst of infidelity. The fire had consumed them together, fusing their bodies beyond recognition. He warned me that the coroner had a difficult task ahead. I covered my face, not from sorrow, but to hide the crooked smile that crept through my anger. "That deceitful, treacherous woman!" I shouted, shocking everyone nearby. "She was cheating on me in the very place where we planned to build our life together, with a contractor no less. Unbelievable." At that moment, the sheriff arrived, followed by a black hearse. I stayed seated as the fire chief approached them, recounting the same grim details he'd just told me. The sheriff struggled to keep a straight face, while the county coroner, a seasoned doctor from our local clinic, requested to examine the bodies. He, the sheriff, and a young deputy headed into the charred trailer behind the fire chief. Soon after, the deputy stumbled out, vomiting onto the grass. The coroner returned, carrying 2 body bags, shaking his head as he passed by. "I'll do my best to separate them, but it may be best to bring them to my office," he muttered. "I'll inform you tomorrow when you can collect her remains." I smirked. "I don't care. Throw her in a landfill for all I care. Don't bother me." The coroner went back into the trailer just as another vehicle pulled up. A woman in a state fire investigator's uniform got out. She approached and asked who I was. "I'm the property owner," I replied. "My wife and her lover died in that fire." My voice must have carried bitterness as she asked, "So, you didn't know about the affair?" "Not the faintest idea," I answered coolly. She introduced herself as a state investigator, explaining that small volunteer departments like this one lack the resources for a full investigation, so she would be handling it. She mentioned she'd need to contact me once the investigation was complete and asked where she could reach me. I handed her my business card. "And about the funeral," I said in an icy tone. "I won't be arranging anything. Her parents might want to claim her, but I won't." I repeated what the coroner had said about how their bodies had fused together and his intent to separate them at his office. They didn't stand on ceremony. If they wanted to be together, then that's how it would be. We watched as a single body bag was loaded into the hearse. The deputy carried it as though it contained both bodies. Then the ambulance, the hearse, the sheriff, and the volunteer firefighters all left the scene. I watched as a female fire investigator entered the trailer to begin her inspection. I doubted she would find anything substantial. That was my first thought. The next day, I parked in front of the house and looked at it. One thing was clear. Madison and her lover had done an incredible job here. The house was almost complete, fully restoring its former charm. But what now? I wandered around the ground floor looking around when a young red-haired woman entered. I asked if she needed any help. She replied, "You don't know me, but I'm one of the subcontractors." She explained that she and her father ran a wallpapering and painting business, and they were preparing the walls for wallpaper they planned to hang later that week. "You'll finish the work, right?" she asked, looking at me expectantly. "Of course," I assured her, nodding. The place already looked stunning, and I knew it would look even better once the finishing touches, the garage, and the stables were done. At that moment, the fire investigator entered through the door. She went straight to the redhead and kissed her. I noted this without judgment. Their relationship was none of my concern. "I thought I saw your truck outside," the investigator said to the redhead. "Maybe we should discuss everything now." The three of us headed to the kitchen, where the crew usually took their lunch breaks. "First," the investigator began, "I need a bit of your money." She pulled out her phone, found a number, and made a call. "Buck? Yeah, it's Violet. Could you come by the old estate near the 9 tomorrow morning? Great. Bring the excavator. A trailer burned here yesterday and my investigation is complete." She paused for a second and then continued. "The owner mentioned he'd like to remove it from the site, but I explained it would be costly and challenging. Then he agreed to dig a big hole and bury it. I told him I had someone for the job, so if you can dig the hole on the right, only on the right. Be careful. The septic tank is on the left," she added. "Just cover it all, conceal it, and make sure there's no trace." She checked the time. 8 in the morning is fine, then see Zoe for payment. "Thanks, and remember, only the right side," she emphasized before hanging up. Then she looked directly at me. You and I, don't need deputies or sheriffs around here who might start digging where they shouldn't, right?" I replied briefly, "Fair enough." She pointed at the redhead. "I see you've already met my partner. She's a talented artist and wallpaper specialist. I think you'll appreciate her work." The redhead extended her hand across the table and gave mine a confident squeeze. My thoughts started racing. They knew more about me than I'd let on. Captain David Hill. "You left it all for your wife," she continued with a slight smile. "Not the best choice, but it worked out for us." She added, "By the way, if I hadn't known where to look, I wouldn't have found it. Impressive work." Curiosity stirred in me. How did she know all this about me and my wife? She seemed to sense my unease. "You're wondering, aren't you?" she asked. I nodded, feeling a bit nervous. "Don't worry," she reassured. "This is something you can handle." Around a year ago, I attended a conference for fire investigation experts, and over lunch I met a former Marine. He'd served in an explosive ordnance disposal unit, and as we got talking, he shared some incredible stories. But one story in particular stuck with me, about his captain named David Hill. He told me that this captain was an extraordinary man, both as a leader and a teacher. He taught at the EOD school and even trained CIA agents. His skill level was so high that he could create nearly undetectable bombs using unconventional materials that no one would ever suspect. A while later, my acquaintance Zoe mentioned that David Hill and his wife were restoring an old house and had hired her to do the painting and wallpapering. That made me wonder if this David Hill could be the same Marine Corps captain I'd heard about. I checked, and indeed, it was the same David Hill. It was then that Zoe shared a suspicion with me. She thought your wife was having an affair with a man named Anderson. She had noticed them leaving the site together to select materials and suspected that their trips were stretching out without any real reason. Additionally, she saw them spending a suspicious amount of time alone together in a trailer. Then, when I heard about the fire, everything clicked. I figured you, David, found out about the affair. So you figured it all out? I took my revenge. So what do you want from me? Money? Ownership of this house? Just tell me what you need. Don't jump to conclusions. Zoe and I talked last night. We don't want money or property. We want a family. We're both lesbians, but we've always dreamed of becoming mothers. We believe you would make a great father, and this house is the perfect place to raise children. So you're proposing that I become the father of your children, give you this house, and in return, you'll keep my secret. Is that it? It's not that simple. We don't want to raise children without a father figure. Let me explain. You took revenge on your wife for her infidelity and on her lover. We understand why. Zoe and I are a couple, but we're still keeping it a secret. Nobody knows, not even her father. To everyone else, we're just friends. We're very discreet in public. We don't go on dates together or show affection, so no one suspects there's more than friendship between us. Who would guess that either of us is a lesbian? No one. By the way, you're both very beautiful, and I don't want to be rude, but you're both very attractive. Violet notices that I've glanced at Zoe, understanding what I'm thinking. She does have stunning eyes, doesn't she? But don't worry, I'm not the jealous type. Here's our idea. Once the house is ready, we all move in together. We share one room, even one bed. We live openly, like a family of three without any secrecy. You get to have both of us, and together we'll raise children as a family. It will be a home like any other, just with two moms and one dad. Is that so hard to imagine? So what do you think? To be honest, it's hard to say that the idea doesn't sound appealing. Most men would be happy with either of you, let alone both. The prospect of sharing a bed with both of you every night? Hard to imagine anyone turning down such an offer. To move forward without drawing unnecessary attention, how do you suggest we proceed? He asked. A sudden shift from grieving over my wife's infidelity and our breakup to living with two attractive women might look unnatural. Violet, remember what I said. He's good at noticing details. Here's what we propose. Start coming to my house more often under the pretext of overseeing the finishing touches on the renovations. This way, you'll have the chance to meet Zoe. Talk to her father, show a bit of interest in her, and casually mention that she has a friend. Then, one evening, invite us both out to dinner. Over the next 6 months, things can progress gradually. Everyone knows how deeply I was affected by my wife's betrayal. People will likely be glad to see I'm rebuilding my life and moving on. Over time, we could all move in together and start building a family. Of course, not everyone will approve of such a relationship, but why should that stop us? What do you think of our plan? The idea struck me as well thought out. I decided not to attend the funeral, making it clear I was unaware of my wife's affair. Her parents often apologized, though I never held anything against them. Gradually, Zoe, Violet, and I began spending time together, going out for dinners and watching movies. The first time I walked them to Violet's apartment, they both went inside, and Zoe turned to give me a passionate kiss, confident and without hesitation. As we pulled away, Violet followed suit, hugging me tightly. Then Violet leaned toward Zoe and they kissed, fully aware that I was watching. Imagine the moments that await us when we're all living together. Good night, and drive safely, they said, gently guiding me out the door. Scenes like this repeated over the next few months. We grew closer, though they insisted we wait until we officially moved in together. So I waited patiently. When the house was ready, they helped me pick out and arrange the furniture. About a month later, Violet moved out of her apartment, and Zoe informed her father she was moving in with me. On a hot Friday, after hours of unpacking in the sweltering room, we were exhausted and drenched in sweat. Violet suggested a shower, and I was about to step out of the bedroom, assuming they wanted some privacy. "And where do you think you're going? Get undressed and join us. The shower's big enough for 3, she said with a smile. It was the first time I saw them both completely bare, an image I'll never forget. We spent more than half an hour in the shower, washing each other and savoring the warmth. Thankfully, we had a tankless water heater that proved to be worth it. We were now fully committed to life with each other, confident that our secrets would remain ours alone. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.